Hi, this is Anthony Hamilton. I'm the author of Mind, Time, and Power, which is a book that describes a new model of consciousness that was recently discovered and proven by scientists at Harvard in the late 90s. This new model says that your mind actually is a kind of time machine, and that thinking is literally time traveling. So we are all time travelers. About a year ago, I started a live series of Zoom calls for people who are fans of my work and are learning how to use their mind as a time machine to revisit the past, restructure their past, change their past, get rid of negative emotions, negative feelings, negative experiences in the past, and use their mind in the future to design and create more of what they want in their life. So this new model of consciousness that says your mind is a time machine, that you are a time traveler, that thinking is time traveling, that when you think of the past, there's a part of your mind that literally travels in time and picks up information from the past, brings it into the present, just like my computer goes to visit another website on the net and brings information in to my computer. This is the new model of consciousness and how it works. So once you realize you are literally a time traveler, and when you learn to use it and learn to control it, you can literally change your past, change your present, and create more of the future that you want. So it's an incredible power that you were born with that you have not been told about, you have not been taught how to use it. This is cutting edge information, and most people have never heard of it. This is what my books are about. This is what my training is all about, teaching people how to use their mind like a time machine. And I started a series of live Zoom Q&A calls about a year ago for people who are using my materials to literally transform their lives, change their past, change their present, change their future. So in December last year, about 5 months ago, I decided to do a demonstration by taking a trip to England, and to demonstrate the power of the mind, I decided to do some speaking in the UK. I didn't know anybody in the UK. I had no contacts in the UK, but I had this idea. Wouldn't it be nice to do a little bit of speaking while I'm in the UK? This video that you're now watching is a recording of the talk that I gave when I was in the UK. And the photographs that are in the video are some photographs that I took when I traveled to the UK with my wife. So this information about how you can use your mind as a time machine, I talk about where the idea originally came from when I had a dream as a 10-year-old, and how I've been working with this material now since the age of 10. So I hope you enjoy this video. And if you want more information about this process that I describe in this talk, by all means, you can contact me through my website, mindtimeandpower.com. Now, this recording that I made was by no means a professional recording. I simply took out my cell phone, put it on a chair beside me, and started my talk. So I apologize in advance for the quality of this recording, but I think you'll enjoy it. And if you have any questions about it, please contact me through my website. So enjoy this video and enjoy these photographs. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. It's a thrill for me and for my wife, Jane. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is the power of the mind, the power of thought, and how we can use our mind, our thinking, our attitudes, our beliefs, our mindset to
heal the past, heal our past mistakes, heal our past trauma, transform our present, and create the future that we want, or at least create more of what we want. So that's what it is about. And I think all of you are into the spiritual aspect and the mental aspect of mindset and attitude. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to tell my story of how I got into this, how I got started with this whole theme here, and eventually ended up writing this book and making a career out of talking about what I finally figured out is that your mind is a kind of a time machine. So when we think, there's a part of us that literally moves in time. So that is what I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm going to talk about how the mind works, mental time travel, what it is and how it works. Specifically, I'm going to talk about how you can use it to enhance your life starting right now, and how you can achieve more of your dreams, more of your goals, and become happier and more successful in any area of your life that you want to enhance. How you can, in some sense, erase past mistakes, certainly get rid of or diminish past trauma and negative feelings, negative experiences, and things like that. So that's what it's about. We're going to have time for Q&A, so if anybody has any questions, by all means, ask, because I'm here for you. The purpose of the evening is to inspire you, give you some new way of looking at yourself, a new way of looking at your life, a new way of looking at your mind, and give you some tools that you can start using right away. So for me, my story began when I had a dream. I was 10 years old, and I literally had a dream. I was outside, I fell asleep. It was a hot summer day, I fell asleep. And the next thing I knew, I was floating out of my body, looking down at myself, what seemed to me like the age of 32. In the East, they talk about enlightenment being like a flash of lightning on a dark night. So you can imagine, you look outside, it's dark, you can't see anything. And then you get a lightning flash and boom, you can sort of see everything for a second or two, and then it goes dark again. That's what this experience was like for me. And what I saw was at around the age of 32, I was going to be traveling, I was going to be teaching, I was going to be writing, I was going to be helping people live happier and more successful lives. I was going to be married to an Asian woman. I was going to be a university professor. I was going to be a writer, a teacher, all of that just boom, like that. I remember when I woke up from this dream, it was the middle of the afternoon. I went running home, running in the house. My parents were quite religious. I'd been to church and I went to Sunday school. And so when I had this dream, this vision, this experience, whatever you want to call it, I thought maybe God was talking to me. So I went running home, ran in the house. My mother was in the kitchen, and I said, "Mom, guess what?" I said, "When I grow up, I'm going to be a university professor. I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to be traveling and helping people live better lives. I'm going to be famous." Right? And she laughed. And she said, "You are so silly." Well, that hurt. I thought she was going to go, "Fantastic, good for you," right? But she said, "You're so silly." So in that moment, I sort of thought, well, if I can't reveal my innermost thoughts and feelings to my mother, then I'm not going to tell anybody about this dream. I'm not going to tell anybody about this dream ever. And the truth is, I didn't tell anybody about it for around 50 years. But even though I didn't tell anybody about it, it continued to intrigue me and inspire me and give me a focus and a purpose for my life, right up until today, actually. So this dream was arguably the most important event of my entire life, because it's given a shape and a focus and a purpose to my entire life, and yet it was just a thought. Shortly after this, quite soon after, the age of 11, 12, 13, something like that, I started to do what I considered my research. And I read everything that I could find about the mind, time travel, ESP, psychic phenomena, spirituality, prophets in the Bible. They had people that could interpret dreams and tell you what's going to happen in the future. People who have ESP, they can read your tea leaves or your tarot cards or whatever, and they can read your fortune. So I realized that certain people are given permission, shall we say, to know the future in advance. But most people think you have to be either a prophet or Nostradamus or have some kind of special power. But right from the very beginning, the feeling that I had was, well, I'm just me. I'm just an ordinary guy. I'm not a prophet. I'm not a psychic. I'm not a special person. So whatever happened to me must happen to everybody, or must happen to lots of people. Maybe they just don't notice it. So here we are now, 65 years later, roughly, and I'm more and more convinced that that's true. As I say, all through my teens, I read everything I could find on success, spirituality, happiness, religion. I studied Buddhism. I studied Eastern philosophy. I studied pretty well every success book that you could find. Think and Grow Rich and The Power of the Subconscious Mind, The Power of Thinking Big. You name any self-help book that was written probably from 1900 until the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I pretty well read them all. I was looking for the answers. So when I got to be in my last year of high school, now I assumed, well, my life's going to be easy. It's going to be rosy, right? I'm going to be the successful person, happy person, writing books, making money, traveling, teaching people. So obviously my life's going to be easy, right? Well, didn't work out that way. By the time I got to the last year of high school, I was just so fed up with school, fed up with church, fed up with my parents, fed up with everything. Nothing made any sense. I became really bummed out and depressed. I managed to squeak out of high school. Didn't quite fail, but I wasn't able to go to university because my marks weren't high enough. And so I just got really depressed for about 10 years because I thought, here I had this destiny of being this successful person and happy person and writer and whatever. Now I can't go to university. I'm never going to get to be a professor. I'm never going to be able to be a successful business person or teacher or anything like that. So I got pretty depressed. And so by the time I was in my mid-20s, I was 60 pounds overweight. I smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day. I was doing all kinds of strange medicinal substances, as we can say. Basically, trying to heal my own pain. Now, this dream, I saw myself at the age of 32. So as I got into my mid-20s and late 20s, 28, 29, my life was a complete mess. Like I said, I was overweight and I smoked too much and drank too much. My relationships were a mess. I thought, I got to turn my life around somehow, because in this dream, I saw myself at the age of 32. So I thought, I got 2-3 years left. So I attended a course, which some of you may have attended, or something very similar to it. At the time, it was called Silva Mind Control. Silva Mind Control was basically about using your inner senses. We can do this right now. You can just close your eyes, take a deep breath, just go inside. And as you're relaxing, just remember, if you can think of some kind of positive experience, let's say, that's happened to you, let's say in the last year or so. Something nice that's happened, something positive. Just get a sense of where you were, who you were with. Try and get a picture of it. Maybe get a picture, get some color, perhaps. If you were with some other people, maybe you can hear their voices. If there was any music or any sounds of nature, bring that memory back. And try and bring back the feelings of that positive experience. Just kind of take a deep breath and what does it feel like to be happy, to be in a good mood, to be successful? Something that you've done that was successful. Think of a time when you accomplished something that you were proud of. You got your driver's license, or you learned how to cook a special kind of a meal. Maybe you learned a new dance step, learned how to sew something, bought a new car, graduated from high school, graduated from some course, got a diploma. So think of that memory and just notice the feelings that are around that event. Let those feelings come back into your body. That feeling of happiness, success, feeling proud. And when you're ready, come on back into the room here, into the chair that you're sitting in, and open your eyes when you're ready. How was that? Okay? Everybody could do that to some degree, right? How do you feel now? Have your feelings changed? Anybody feel better? A little more positive, right? A little more positive energy. So there's an example of how, arguably, I would say, your body is now different. You're feeling different. There's different neurochemicals in your brain, different chemicals in your body. You're thinking about that positive experience. You feel a little better. But what's changed? Well, nothing in here has changed. Nothing in the physical world has changed. But your mind went someplace. You thought about something in the past, right? It might have been a year ago, it might have been 5 years ago, it might have been 10 years ago, it might have been 2 weeks ago. It doesn't matter, right? So this is what I learned to do when I took this course in Silva Mind Control. So this is basically using your inner senses to think about specific things. In this case, I had you think about something that was positive, right? Something that felt good, something that was happy. So this is what I learned to do when I was about 28. And so that was, for me, that was a huge revelation. The idea that I have an inner set of senses. We have 5 senses. People talk about having a 6th sense. Well, what I understand now is that we have 5 outer senses and we have 5 inner senses. So we have 10 senses. We have an inner sense of seeing, inner sense of hearing. So if you're very visual, if you're an artist or you have a good visual imagination, you might be able to close your eyes and imagine something visual, right? If you're into music or you have an auditory sense, you might be able to hear music, or you listen to a babbling brook or something, or water, and it might inspire you to think about music, right? Likewise, you may have an inner sense of feeling when you think about getting your driver's license or buying a new car, graduating from school. You feel proud. You feel good, right? So those inner senses are what I learned to tap into and to use when I took this course in what you might call creative visualization or meditation, right? So that for me was a big turnaround. That was a big step. To learn that I have a whole inner world that I can tap into anytime. It's always there. Using my inner senses, what I call my inner self, using my inner senses, I can pick up information. I can bring back memories. I can imagine different things. I can create different scenarios in my mind, and they can affect me. And of course, if you think about the negative side of it, you remember something negative, you might get angry or you might get frustrated. Or if you imagine something in the future that you think is scary, you might feel afraid. So realizing that my inner world affects my outer world, i.e. my body in this case, that was a huge revelation to me. So that was a big breakthrough at that point in my life. So I started to visualize myself as a more successful person. Now, one of the things that I saw in this dream was that I was going to be speaking and I was going to be writing. Well, I'd never done any speaking. I'd never done any writing. As a matter of fact, I actually quit school. I went to college for one semester, and I actually quit because the teacher asked me to stand up in front of the class and read something. I had been a stutterer from the age of about 8. I literally could hardly get 2 words out. And I was so embarrassed at speaking in front of people that I would almost never talk. I seemed to be fine one-on-one, but if there were more than a couple of people there, I wouldn't say anything. I never told a joke. I would never talk in public. I would never do anything like this. And yet, I thought, I need to get over this, because if I'm going to be successful in my life, if I'm ever going to tap into this dream that I had and make it happen, I'm going to have to learn how to speak. So I used to visualize myself speaking. And this class that I was in, that I learned about this visualization technique, the people that were in the class, and there were about this many people, there were about 30 people or so in the class, they enjoyed the class so much that they said, well, we should keep the class going. Well, the teacher that was teaching the class, he came into town for a weekend, did a weekend seminar, and then he left. So they said, let's have a weekly meeting similar to this, and we will review the material and we'll practice visualization and kind of keep the energy of this class alive. So they said, well, we should have somebody lead the group. There should be somebody to lead the class. Well, nobody wanted to lead the class. They were all too afraid. So I said, well, I'll do it. And the reason that I volunteered to do it was because I thought, I have to do it. I mean, I can't continue to be so afraid, to be embarrassed, afraid of making a mistake, afraid of speaking in public. I got to get over this, So I thought, I'll lead the group. And what I used to do was, before the meeting, like a week before the meeting, I would pretend I was talking, and I'd stand in the room and I would pretend I was leading the class in a meditation exercise or reading something from one of the lessons in the book that we had, and I would literally do that. That gave me the confidence. The first couple of classes that we had, or the first couple of meetings, it literally gave me the confidence to try it. And I swear, I am not exaggerating, the first meeting that we had, I was sure that the people that were sitting, listening to me talk, could see my knees knocking. because I was literally like this. I was terrified. And then after the meeting was over, somebody came up to me and they said, "Man, you are such a good speaker. I wish I could speak like you. You have so much confidence." And I thought, how is this possible? How can it be possible that I could be so afraid and so terrified and so sure that I was making a fool of myself, and yet nobody else could see it? So I led this class for 26 weeks because the book that we were using, the lesson planner that we had, there were 26 lessons. So I led this group for 26 weeks. And by the time the 26 weeks was up, I was perfectly comfortable speaking. And of course, I've been speaking ever since. And now I love to speak. So it was a huge breakthrough. And at one of the meetings that we had, very, very similar to this, one of the people after the class came up and said, "I'm just visiting from out of town here. I belong to another group in a different city, a different country, actually, because I was living in Vancouver at the time. And this person was visiting from Portland, Oregon. So he said, I belong to this positive thinking group in Portland, Oregon. We'd love to have you come down and teach a class in Portland. Would you like to come?" So I said, yeah. So I went to Portland and I was teaching meditation exactly as the one we just did. Close your eyes, think about a positive event in the past. And everybody was sitting there closing their eyes, right? Right in the middle of that meditation, I thought, this dream is starting to come true. Because in the dream, I said, I'm going to be a successful writer, successful speaker. I'm going to be traveling. I'm going to be teaching people how to use their inner power to be more happy and more successful. And I thought, oh my God, this dream is starting to come true. I took another program from a company called Success Motivation Institute, which used to be at one time a huge company. It still is a big company. But at one time, it was the most successful motivation, positive thinking, sales training, and business training, entrepreneur training organization in the world, right? Working in 36 different countries. So I started to work with this company, and I learned a system of goal setting and visualizing and writing down your goals in 6 different areas of your life. What do you want physically? What do you want mentally? What do you want spiritually? What do you want financially? What are the benefits if you achieve this goal, right? What are the benefits to you? What are the benefits to your kids? What are the benefits to your grandkids? What are the benefits socially? What are the benefits spiritually? There was a whole workbook, about 35 pages that I filled out, and this was this goal-setting planner. And so I did this for a couple of years. I was like around 30 years old, 31, 32 at this time. And by now, I had been doing this meditation exercise every day that I had learned from Silva Mind Control. I was doing this meditation exercise for 20 minutes every day. And so one day I thought, I can't remember anything positive before about the age of 20. Because my teens were so traumatic and I was so depressed and angry and frustrated. Anytime I thought about my parents, I just got frustrated. Anytime I thought about the church, I felt like they didn't understand me. Anytime I thought about my parents or school, I just got angry, right? So I thought, I must have had some positive experiences as a kid. Every kid you see is happy, playing, running around, How come I can't remember anything positive? All I could remember was stuff that made me angry and upset. So I thought, well, I've been doing this meditation exercise. What I'll do is I'll use my imagination. I'll go back in my mind and I'll try and remember some positive experiences. So I remember that it took me probably 3-4 days. I couldn't remember anything positive. Anything I remembered from school, church, family, childhood just made me feel bad. But one day I remembered, baseball. I remember playing baseball when I was a kid. I loved playing baseball. I had lots of friends playing baseball. So I went back the next day while doing my meditation. I went back in my mind and I revisited that baseball game. And I did that every day for, as I remember, about 2 months. And I got to the point where I could remember all my friends' names. I remembered their pets' names. I remembered their parents' names. I remembered their parents' phone numbers. I remember the kind of cars they used to drive. I remembered where I lived. I remembered all my neighbors and my friends and everything. The experience was like having a huge painting, and I was kind of cleaning off the soot and the dirt from this painting. Every time I did that meditation, I went back to that summer when I was playing baseball, I could remember more and more and more things. And I thought, man, this is amazing. All this information is still there that I had forgotten about. And one day I remembered that after this baseball game, I went to this field behind my house. There was a big tree that the older kids in the neighborhood had built this tree house in the top of this tree. So I climbed up the top of this tree. I laid down on the top of this tree house on the roof, and I laid down. I was looking at the clouds going by. And I fell asleep. And I woke up, and I thought to myself, that's it. I just had the same dream. But I had the dream from the other end. Here I was 32, remembering being 10, falling asleep outside. When I was 10, I had a dream. I was 32, speaking, writing, teaching people about using their inner senses and their power to live better lives. And I had been looking for 20 years trying to find out the answer to 2 questions. One question was, how is it possible to get information from the future? Because that's what I thought happened to me. The second question was, what does it take to be more happy and more successful? And I had learned that from Success Motivation Institute. It's how to set goals. You have to plan your life like an architect plans a building. You sit down and you start with a very rough sketch. This is the kind of thing I want. You know, an architect will design a building, and then he'll spend, hours and hours and hours for weeks, perhaps, or months, and eventually he'll get to the place where he's got a complete full set of drawings. He knows every square inch of that building. He knows where every screw, every nail, every pane of glass, every piece of wire, every tap, every pipe, everything goes. When you get to that level of detail, you can easily imagine and visualize that building, right? And you can actually give the plans to a builder. He can build the building. You can make your vision real when you have enough detail. So I thought, that's it. This is the answer to what I've been looking for 20 years. Memory is not what I had thought, which was kind of a snapshot, like opening up a photo album, and here's a picture of us at the beach, and here's a picture of us doing this, and here's that's what I had thought memory was. Memory is a connection. The same as we just did when I said remember some positive experience, and we all agreed you can remember it, and it changes your feelings, changes your thoughts, right? So I thought, memory is a connection, number one. Big idea. That also answered the second question, which was, how do you get to be successful? What's the secret of success? The secret of success is you have to have a goal. If you want to go from here to there, you got to know where there is. I learned that from Paul J. Meyer, Success Motivation Institute, working every day in this binder, setting my goals. And I thought, well, where's a goal? It's in the future. So thinking is a connection. Thinking of the future is a connection to the future. That's a goal. When you have a goal, you can get there. When Sue and Anita invited me to come here in Bournemouth. I looked on a map. I saw where Bournemouth was. I figured out what train to take to get here. That was a goal. Here I am. When you have a goal, it's a connection. It's a connection. When you think of the past, it's a connection. So thinking is a connection. And I started teaching these workshops in around 1980. And I did that for around 25 years. I traveled around. I wrote a book about the fact that thinking is a kind of time travel. When you are thinking of the past, there's a part of your mind, which I call the focus of your awareness. So the focus of your awareness is in the past. When you have a goal, the focus of your mind is in the future. Whether you're thinking of taking a trip or whether you're thinking of buying your groceries for next week, your mind is in the future. Oh, I got to go to the store and I got to pick up the milk and some bread and whatever, right? So thinking is time travel. This is what I figured out in around 1980. So I started teaching. Your mind is a time machine. I started to write my book, Mind, Time, and Power. So this was my career. I made a living traveling around, teaching people. I mean, literally having that dream come true. So I had thought, I'm never going to become a university professor because I failed out of high school. I can't go to university. How do you get to be a university professor? You got to get a bachelor's degree, you got to get a master's degree, you got to get a PhD, you got to find a job as a teacher in a university, and then you're a university professor. That's how you do it. Well, I can't go to university because I bombed out of high school. So I was complaining to a friend of mine one day. I was trying to write this book about your mind as a time machine. And I said, I can't do it. It's too complicated. I don't have enough education. I don't have enough information about the mind and psychology and philosophy and time travel and physics and all that kind of stuff. So she said to me, what are you talking about? You can go to university anytime. You're not a kid anymore. You're a mature student. At this time, I was 39 years old. She said, you can enroll at university right now. They'll accept you. They don't care what your marks were in high school. Well, to me, this was a shock. I had no idea this was true. So I went to UBC, University of British Columbia, and I applied, and they said, yeah, come on in. So I went in. So I did my bachelor's degree. I started to do my master's. I got halfway through the master's program, and I was in a pretty severe car accident, had back trauma, spinal trauma, a lot of pain, chronic pain for years, dropped out of that program, thinking at some point I'll get back into it, but I never did. So I thought, well, there goes that dream. I'm never going to be the university professor because you can't be a professor unless you have your PhD, right? But what I did have was a degree in philosophy and linguistics. And so I thought, well, I'll start teaching English, because I love language. I mean, one of my favorite things. Being a student in Catholic school, as some of you might know, you study Latin, right? I studied Latin for 12 years. I was a whiz at Latin. So learning languages and teaching grammar, I was good at that. So I got a job in a college teaching English, which I loved. It was great. The college had a job in China. They offered me this job teaching English in China. So I went to China. I taught in China for 4 years. The first week I was there, I fell down the stairs and badly hurt my leg. Wasn't able to walk, wasn't able to teach, wasn't able to go to school. So one of my fellow teachers said to me, well, hey, I know this great massage therapist. I can introduce you to her, and she's done wonders on some of the people that I know. So he introduced me to Jing. And we both picked up a bit of a head cold, as you might be able to tell from my voice. We got caught in the rain in London. So we became friends. She fixed my back, fixed all the chronic pain from years of, literally 15 years after this car accident. She fixed all that, fixed my leg. I got back to work teaching. We became friends. We started hanging out together, and eventually we ended up getting married. And I thought to myself again, oh my God, here's another part of that dream. And this has been happening to me through my whole life. And one day we were called to a special meeting because I worked for Capilano College in North Vancouver. That was my employer. And one day we had a faculty meeting, and the president of the college came to visit. And she said, I have some good news. She said, Capilano College just received its charter. We're now Capilano University. And all of you faculty members are all officially university professors. And I almost fell out of my chair. I mean, I could not believe it. So I had this dream when I was 10, tried to make it happen, at least the part about being the professor, tried 2 or 3 times to figure out a way to get there. Didn't happen, and it happened kind of by a fluke. I eventually finished the book before I went to China, published the book, put it on the internet, sold it on the internet. The job ended in 2009. So I came back to Canada in 2009. I thought, well, what am I going to do? I might as well go back on the lecture circuit and start talking about mental time travel in my book. So I started to do a little bit of research, and what I found, much to my surprise, because I didn't know, this more or less happened when I was in China. It actually took place in the late 90s. Some scientists at Harvard University in the States and U of T in Toronto doing research on memory using something called a functional MRI. They discovered 2 amazing things which completely blew their minds. One was what they now call neuroplasticity. Some of you probably heard about neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the idea that your brain can continue to change, your brain can continue to grow new neurons, can continue to develop throughout your life. For example, you can imagine somebody practicing the piano. If they look at the part of the brain that controls the fingers, they can see that it's changed. It's thicker, it's stronger, there's more neurons in there, there's more connections because the person's using their fingers, right? So the idea that your brain can change as you practice, that wasn't so much of a shock. And they said, okay, this kind of makes sense, right? What they started to realize, you can change your brain just by thinking. This was a mind-blowing. I mean, this blew the mind. This was in 1995, approximately. When I was in university studying psychology in the 80s. And in the 80s, it was scientific fact. You cannot change the brain. The brain loses neurons, gets weaker and weaker as you get older, and it just loses its strength, right? And the idea that you can affect the brain by thinking, well, this was a joke. It was ludicrous. The idea that you can change the brain just by thinking in a certain way, the scientists were shocked to figure this out. Well, I wasn't shocked. I knew it already. Because some of the books that I've been reading since I was a teenager about the power of the mind, the magic of thinking big, Think and Grow Rich, the Science of Growing Rich, The Master Key. Some of you might know some of these books. It says in there, these visualization exercises, if you do them on a regular basis, they will change your brain. This was written like in 1916, 1910, some of these books. One of the books, called The Science of Getting Rich, was written by a guy named Wallace D. Wattles. Now, you might have anybody heard of Wallace D. Wattles? That book, it was the inspiration for the movie The Secret. You read Wallace D. Wattles, and he says in there, the brain does not make the man makes the brain. He said, any talent, any ability, any attitude that you want to develop, if you pretend, if you visualize it, if you imagine that you have it, you will develop it. Your brain will change. You will become the person that you need to be in order to do the things that you want to do in your life. Well, I've been teaching that since 1980 in my workshops. So I told people, your mind is a time machine. When you're thinking of the past or you're thinking of the future, it's the same thing. Just like when you make a phone call, you can call east, you can call west. The phone doesn't care. Time is exactly the same way. And you can develop your confidence. You can develop your belief. If you do the visualization exercise that we did in the beginning here, where I just said, think of a past success, let that feeling in, let that success feeling in, you will start to feel more successful. You will remember more past successes. I've got a past successes list, and I advise all of you to write a past successes list. 25, 30, 40, 50, 100, 200 past successes. Spend a couple of minutes every day. That's the secret. The secret is you got to do it every day. You don't have to do it a lot. 1 or 2, 3 minutes is enough, but you have to do it every day. When you do it every day, what the scientists now know and what they've proven and accepted is that after about 30 days, they can measure changes in your brain. So Wallace Wattles was right. The Buddha was right. He said, you make your world with your thoughts. Shakespeare was right. He said, nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it that way. Thinking makes it so. So this blew my mind when I discovered this in around 2010 when I came back from China with Jing, because I didn't know that it was now scientific fact. So that's basically my story of how I discovered mental time travel, what it is, how it works, how you can use your inner senses to work with your past, develop more feelings, more positive feelings, more happiness, more success, whatever it might be. Work with your future, set a goal, work toward the goal, imagine yourself achieving the goal, build your confidence, build your belief, see yourself that way, see yourself as a person who has the power, see yourself as a person who's getting stronger, getting happier, getting healthier, having better relationships. Your brain will change. What used to be difficult now becomes easy. What used to seem impossible now seems like, hey, maybe it's possible. So basically, that's my story. That's what I'm all about now. And thanks for listening. If you have any questions, by all means. Thank you so much for your attention. Anybody have any questions? Any comments? I have a weekly group that I do on the internet because of COVID and everything. So I've been running this class now for just over a year. We started the first week of January last year. So it's based on my book and on a workbook. The workbook that I learned from Paul Meyer and Success Motivation Institute. You can get the workbook for free. I'll give it to you for free. All you have to do is just join my mailing list, and I'll let you know how you can do that. Join the mailing list. I'll send you a 10-lesson mind power course about how to visualize, how to set goals, how to use your inner senses. There's a couple of meditation exercises with it. There's some links in that course to audios and videos I have on YouTube. You can take that workbook, start working with the worksheets. The worksheets are quite simple. What do you want? List your dreams, list your ideas, list your goals. Start to organize them. Become the architect of your future, literally. It doesn't matter how sketchy or how nondescript and how indistinct your ideas of your goals are. A little bit of time, 5 minutes a day here and there when you think of it. Take out a worksheet and start playing with it. Pretty soon, it starts to make sense, and you become more and more confident. You become more and more clear about what you want, why you want it. So I'm doing this class every week, and so I decided that it was time to go to England, take a trip to England. I was born in Bedford. I've been saying to my wife, one of these days I'll take you to England. We'll go visit Bedford, right? But COVID, we couldn't do it, or at least it was inconvenient, right? So in December, I said to Jing, okay, this is the year. Go to England, visit Bedford. I'll take you to the house where I was born, right? So I thought to myself one day, this was like December 10th or something. It was, early in December. I said, hey, I got an idea. Wouldn't it be nice to do a talk in England or do some speaking in England while I'm there? That would be fun. That would make a fun goal, right? So I thought, well, how can I possibly do some speaking in England? I don't know anybody in England, right? So I did an exercise, which I'll teach you. We can do it right now. I basically said, okay, here I am in England. I'm speaking. Got a room full of people here. I'm talking about mental time travel, whatever. How did I do this? How did I get this to happen? And so I got a message back, and it said, write to some positive thinking groups. You talk about positive thinking. There's lots of positive thinking groups. So I put together a little email. I went to Google, my friend Google, and said, okay, positive thinking groups in the UK, right? I came up with about 25 or so likely suspects, the usual suspects. And so I wrote them an email, and I said, hi, this is me. I'm an author and a speaker, and I talk about positive thinking and the power of the mind and mental time travel and visualization and whatever. Would you like me to come and talk to your group? Well, most of them never answered. A few of them did. A few of them said, well, we don't really have anything. We don't have a very big group. Or we canceled our meetings. We don't have any more meetings, whatever. But one of them, very nice guy, I forget his name now, it was David something. He had a group, and he wrote to me, and he said, well, to tell you the truth, I don't really have anything. I can't really offer you an opportunity. But he said, I suggest you contact Sue Stone. So I look on the internet, oh, there's Sue Stone, right? So I wrote to Sue Stone, sent her the email, and she said, well, let's talk. Let's talk about it. She was kind enough. We had a Zoom call about a week later. And in the meantime, she did a bit of research on Anthony Hamilton. She saw that I had this book and that I was, had a YouTube channel and that sort of thing. So she thought, oh, okay, well, maybe he's an okay guy. So we had a Zoom call, and she introduced me to Anita, and she said, do you want to come and talk to my group in Bournemouth? So I said, yes, love to, right? Here I am. So that's literally how you do it. Now, the way I understand it now, because here I've been doing this now. I mean, I had this dream 65 years ago, right? I'm in my mid-70s now. So I've been thinking about this a long time. And I understand that, the idea of mental time travel and your mind is the time machine. It can be a little bit of a lot to take in one shot. But your mind is fractal. Anybody know what a fractal is? A fractal pattern? It's like it's like a pattern, right, that repeats and repeats and repeats. I mean, think of a shell on the beach. It's got that spiral pattern. You look in the stars in the sky and you see the same pattern. If you look at a tree, if you look at an orchard, let's say an apple orchard, right? All those apple trees, they all have the same pattern. They all look the same, but they're all different. Every tree is individually different, but they have the same pattern because they have the same DNA. So what I've found is that our mind is like that. For example, if you can drive, most of us can drive, right? You can drive anywhere. You can drive a place you've never been, right? Now, you may have never been to Edinburgh, but if I asked you, could you drive there? You'd say, yeah, I can drive there. I've never driven there, but I know I can drive there. Why? Because I know how to drive. I know how to read a map. I know how to use Google Earth or whatever it might be, right? So driving is an example of a skill that you have that you can use it to go anywhere that you want to go. Now, how many of us here have bought groceries? Have you bought groceries? Anybody ever bought groceries? Yeah, some of us. So, if you can buy groceries, you can achieve your goals. Because buying groceries is a perfect example of a goal. Now, when you achieve a goal, it's kind of like driving a car. If you drive across Bournemouth, you can drive across the country. It's basically the same thing, right? Not much different. And it's the same thing. So when you're shopping for your groceries, you're doing the same thing. You say, okay, what do I need and how can I find it? And, what's the likely place that I can buy it? I'm working this week, so what I'll do is on the way home on Tuesday, I'll stop in the store there and so you formulate a plan, right? You can maybe visualize yourself doing it. Now, here's the thing. When you're home and you're thinking about buying your groceries in a couple of days, you are contacting your future self, what I call your future self. You're seeing yourself in the store buying the groceries, right? When you're in the store, you're buying your groceries, here's the bread, and here's the milk, and here's the cheese and the sausages, whatever you do. You can remember your past self. You can remember being at home saying, I'm going to buy groceries on Tuesday. So when I was in Victoria, BC, talking to my group, my weekly Saturday group, I said to them, early May 2nd, I'm going to be in Bournemouth giving a talk. I'm going to be able to remember being here talking to you guys. Nothing unusual about that, right? So to me, that's the key difference. That's the key insight that I figured out when I was roughly 32 years old. That's the big change. To me, this is a transformative idea. This is a huge idea. This is my purpose now, is to get people to understand this idea. That if you can remember doing something yesterday, there's a connection between you and the past. And it's not a picture, it's a connection. It's a connection. You can remember yesterday. You can remember last week, right? You can remember thinking of buying the groceries. I can remember being in Victoria, talking to my online group about being in Bournemouth. When I was in Victoria thinking about the future, well, the future was just a possibility. It wasn't real. It was an idea. It was a dream. It was a fantasy. It was an intention. We have lots of words to describe it. And we tend to think, that's just a thought, that's just an idea. You can't do that. Well, you can do it. If you can buy groceries, you can write a book. If you can travel across your town, you can travel across your country, you can travel across the world. So you already have everything you need. You have the skills. You have the ability. If you can plan a dinner party, you can plan a trip. If you can plan a trip, you can plan the next year of your life. You can plan to be healthier 5 years from now than you are today. If you just set that intention and ask yourself, how can I be healthier? What can I do? Attend Anita's weekly group, learn how to meditate, learn how to visualize, take a dance class, right? So as soon as you think about doing something in the future, I call it connecting with your future self. You connect with your future self, that future self starts to talk to you. It starts to become real. So when I ask my future self, okay, how do I get to talk in England? How do I set up a speaking gig in England? The idea came, call it intuition, call it a hunch, call it an idea. We have so many different ways of labeling it. Now I call it a message from my future self, but it said to me, hey, write an email, contact a bunch of positive thinking groups and see if they want you to come and do a talk. That's what I did. Right? And luckily, Sue said, yes, come on, love to have you come.
Anthony, can I ask, so you, at 10 years old, you had this dream. How do you, what happened? Why do you feel that dream came to you? Why didn't we all at 10 years old have this dream? What do you feel was the connection? What, do you know what I mean?
That's the question, right? That is the big question. Well, the way that I look at it now is we're so used to thinking cause and effect. Now, that's an idea that came from Isaac Newton, more or less, in the 17th century. And he was using billiard balls as his example. That was his model, right? That was Newton's model. So there's a ball on the table, you hit it, and it goes off that way. So here's the cause, here's the effect. The cause is in the past, and the effect is in the future, right? So that's the way we've all been taught about cause and effect. Everything has a cause, and the cause is in the past. But Isaac Newton's theory of motion was changed, updated by a fellow you all heard of, Albert Einstein, right, in 1904. He says in there, part of his theory of relativity is that the mathematics say that the cause for something can be in the future as well as in the past. That's called retrocausation. So people go, how is that possible? Well, retrocausation, to me, is a perfect explanation of how a goal can influence your behavior. The reason I bought a ticket for Jing and I to come to Bournemouth is because we had the goal of coming to Bournemouth and speaking for Anita's group, right? So that idea was the impetus for buying the ticket and coming here. You remember when I explained learning how to visualize? And I learned how to practice, and I used to practice 20 minutes a day. I still do it. I sit in a chair and I close my eyes and I would say, okay, what am I going to do now? Whatever my particular meditation practice might be for that day, right? I was trying to remember something positive about my past. And for the first while, I said I couldn't do it, right? It took me a week or so before I could think of anything. And then I remembered, baseball, right? I used to like playing baseball. So I went back to that baseball game, and I did that for 2 months. Every day, and I remembered more and more and more details about that baseball game. So that connection from 32 to 10, which you would say, oh, that's a memory, right? Here's this guy 32, he's remembering being 10. Well, that connection became so strong, I believe, that the 10-year-old picked it up. Because I picked it up when I was asleep, right? It wasn't a conscious thing. I didn't say to myself, hey, I think I'll become a university professor and marry a Chinese woman and write a book. I didn't say that. I fell asleep and I had this dream, and the dream was like, boom, hey, that was weird. I dreamt I was out of my body. So I think that's probably as likely an explanation for that dream as anything else. The fact that I spent 2 months remembering being 10 when I was 32. That's how I would look at it now, right? So the other part of it, which is kind of the same question that you're asking. Well, how did you know you were going to be a university professor? I mean, what was that about, right? It's kind of the same thing, you see. Now I'm 76. I can remember being 32. I can remember being 10. I can remember getting the job in China to teach English and traveling to China. All of those things, they exist now in my, what you might say is my consciousness, my soul. Whatever Anthony Hamilton is, whoever Anthony Hamilton is, he's been around for 76 years now. And all those experiences, they're part of my life. I can remember a lot of them now. So if they exist in my, use the word soul, essence, consciousness, right? They exist in my consciousness now. I can remember them because they're in the past time. It makes perfect sense that at some point I would have an intuition about it beforehand. And if you start to pay attention, like I've been paying attention now since I was 10, the number of people that I have heard say, when I was a kid, I saw this movie and I saw this person doing this and I wanted to do it, so I started doing it. You watch these interview shows and they ask athletes, how did you become a professional athlete? Michael Jordan says, when I was 10 years old, my parents took me to a basketball game and I said, that's what I want to do when I get older. I want to be a basketball player. Well, you ask an actress, what got you into acting? Well, my parents took me to the movies and I sat there and I watched Judy Garland singing in The Wizard of Oz and I thought, that's what I want to do. So I took singing lessons and dance lessons. So for me, because I'm paying attention to it, I notice it. I hear more and more and more people say, I had a dream, I had a fantasy, I made a decision when I was a kid, and I followed up and it became real. I believe now that pretty well anything that you do in your life that is noteworthy, you have had some intuition about it in the past that maybe you never paid much attention to, but it was there. So one of the things that I do, and I teach, I don't do it much anymore, but I still enjoy doing it, is working with people around language, teaching grammar. And so I was working with this guy. He was from Colombia. His name was William, right? Very successful businessman. Worked in his family business in Colombia. His family had this business for many years. So I was helping him with his English pronunciation. He said to me one day, what is it that you do anyway? I mean, I know you're helping me with my English, but what is it that you do, besides this? So I said, well, I'm an author and I have some books and I do workshops on mind power. And he said, what do you mean? What are you talking about? So I said, well, one of the things I believe is that anything in your life that happens that's important, that's a big thing in your life, you have some intuition about it in the past. As a matter of fact, you might have made a decision in the past that brought that about. And he started to cry. We're sitting in this coffee shop and I'm working with him and he starts to cry, So I said, William, what's going on? What did I say, right? And he said, I just remembered. He said, when I was a teenager, because Colombia is a dangerous country, he said, when I started to work with my parents, he said, I said to myself, if ever I get to the point where I can afford it and I'm married and I have kids, I want to move out of Colombia. I think I'd like to move to Canada because Canada seems like a safe place. And he said, I totally forgot about that until you just mentioned it. And so I've heard this story now so many times from different people that I'm starting to think that this is kind of how it works. I'll give you another quick example before I finish. And you, by all means, if you have any questions, ask. One lady that I work with, her name's Jessica. she said, one of my things is I'd like to move. I'm kind of tired of the place I'm living in, but somehow I just can't get motivated to move. I don't know why. Every time I think about moving, I get a little voice in my head that says, "No, that's not a good idea. Stay where you are. It's not a good time." So I said, well, let's sort through this. Let's see. What exactly is it? And these are my questions, right? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are you seeing? What is it that comes to you when you think about moving? And so it didn't take long, 5 minutes of just sort of teasing out some questions. And she said, "Oh, yeah, I just remembered. When my son was about 5, his dad and me broke up. We got divorced. And I said to myself, I don't want to move far away from my son because he needs his mom close. If I move away, I'm not a good mom. So I got to stay close to my son." So I said, "Well, how old's your son now?" "Well, he's 25." Right. So I said, "Is it okay to move now?" So, literally within about a month, she'd moved, found another job, moved to a different part of the city. So that decision that she made, that if I move away from my son, it means I'm a bad mom, she forgot that. But it was in her mind, and she just felt like, whenever I think about moving, it doesn't seem like it's it's the right thing to do. So, does that help?
Yeah, it does. It's almost like the personality got access to something that's in this. It's almost like access to your blueprint, to your soul's blueprint.
I think so. We're trying to talk about something here that most of us don't have any language to talk about, right? We use the word soul and consciousness and time and space, consciousness. It's really hard because we all have different languages. We all have different backgrounds, right? So one of the challenges I've had over the years is to try and get people to understand, this is how I see it now. Your mind is a time machine and thinking is a connection, right? So I used the words future self and past self a minute ago. Well, how many past selves do you have? Maybe hundreds, right? Who knows? Maybe thousands, but let's, 5 or 10, right? Can I remember a time when I was a total jerk? Yes, when I was a complete fool, right? When I made a stupid mistake, when I was rude to somebody, maybe when I lost my temper, and maybe embarrassed somebody, said something that I regret. So there's that part of me, that's a jerk, right? Who's a fool, who's a clown, who's an idiot. But there's also a time, when I was successful, when I was happy, when I made a decision that was smart, that worked out, right? So part of the work that I do now, and this was why I recommend if you want to contact me and get a hold of that workbook of mine, that free course, one of the things is you write down past successes. Was there a time in the past when you felt proud? Was there a time in the past when you felt loved? What does it feel like to feel loved? It's a great thing to do. Remember that person, remember that time, right, when you felt that way. Build those nerves, like Wallace Wattle says. Think about it often enough and your brain changes, your neurochemicals change. So thanks very much. I appreciate you guys listening to me. I think I've prattled on long enough. Anybody have any questions? Have any comments? I'm at your service here for the next little while.
I just think it's interesting how I can't even speak, but your story, your dream at 10, I just, for me, this is my own view, is that I also think like destiny plays a part in there as well. So, because I know we're talking very much about setting goals that we
Right.
can work towards.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting how you met your wife, Jing, was actually on the back of an accident.
Right. Exactly.
You didn't consciously work towards, and then also how you became professor, again, wasn't of your own doing.
Exactly.
So I just think that, I don't know what I think really, but just the fact that, like, I think destiny plays a part. And actually,
Yeah.
to what Anita, she actually asked, like, you know, why do you feel you had that dream at 10?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why haven't I had that dream at 10? That, you know.
Well, you might have, but you might have forgotten it, you know.
Okay, thank you, because that's, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
Now, I asked Jing one day, because like I said, I believe, and I believe this because I've just seen so many examples of it, that anything noteworthy that happens in your life, you had some intuition about it beforehand, because it's a big thing. It's like when you drop a rock into a pond, the ripples go in all directions, right? So to my mind, you're not only going to, the ripples are not only going to go to the future so you can remember it, they're going to go into the past. So you get a hunch about it. You get an intuition beforehand, right? So I asked Jing one day, did you ever want to come to Canada when you were young? Did you ever sort of, see yourself married to a Canadian or anything like that? She said, no. So I said, oh, well, that was that theory, But then she said, it's funny. She said, it's funny because when my son was in school, like in grade 1, 2, 3 in China, he was studying English. And he didn't like to study English, but she said, I did. So I used to sneak his English books, and I used to imagine myself learning English, right? So she said I was always interested in English. Well, now she's speaking English, right? So it's hard to say, oh, this is it. This is what happened, and this was the result, right? Because let's face it, when I sent that email out to say, hey, here, this is me. I'm going to be in England. Anybody want me to speak? I'm available to speak. Sue could have said no. Or the person who wrote and said, well, I don't have anything to offer you, but maybe Sue Stone does. I didn't know Sue Stone, right? There's a talk that you can get on the internet. It's Steve Jobs talking about creativity. And he's giving the commencement speech at Stanford University in like 2005 or something like that. And he talks about creating things. And he says, when you look to the future, he said, you don't know what's going to happen. And he said, you just have to trust. You just have to have it, you have to trust your gut, have faith, trust your inner self, something. He said, you have to have something to keep going. He said, when you look backwards, then you can see how things line up. But looking forward, you can't tell. So for me, I felt that I was going to be a university professor. And I tried 2 or 3 times to make it happen. Didn't happen. And then it happened by a fluke. So somehow that idea was in my mind at 10. Wasn't really a goal. It was just kind of a, like I say, a flash, just boom. So I suppose if there's any lesson or any idea that I can leave you with is pay attention to your thoughts. Pay attention to your dreams. There was an interview that Joe Vitale did with me. Anita has the link to it. You can watch it. I think it's a good interview. He said to me, okay, now you've done all this, you're successful and you're a senior and, whatever, you've written books, you've made a life teaching people. If you could go back and talk to that 10-year-old, what would you say? And I thought, oh, that's a good question. Well, what I would say is trust yourself. Pay attention to your dreams. Believe in your vision. Thank you, everybody. Oh, we're going to do a draw, right?
I've got one more. I've got
Oh,
Shane's
okay.
name to add in, and I'll give it a little shake.
Okay, yeah, shake it up, and
Yeah.
we'll do a draw here. Now, I have a couple of door prizes. One is a copy of my book. But by the way, if anybody wants a copy of the book, I think they're £15. You can pay Anita whenever it's convenient. I'll be happy to sign it for you. So we'll have a draw for a book, and then my wife has a gift that she brought. Yeah. You want to explain what this is, James? Or you want me to?